Hi, my name is Greg Alchin, and I'd like to talk to you today about how we can implement simple, easy strategies to ensure that we can procure accessible ICT. It comes down to no alley, no buy. Before I begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. I pay my respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I'm an inclusive design consultant and my focus is on removing barriers to participation for people with disabilities. I do this through conducting accessibility audits, developing resources, delivering training and creating policy and procedures. And I'm privileged enough to undertake these activities across Australia and throughout the Asia Pacific. The first step in inclusive procurement starts with changing our mindsets about the nature and extent of disability. What we decide to buy can remove or raise barriers that shape the ability of others to access, participate in, and contribute to on the same basis. For better or worse, the people who make the procurement decisions determine who can participate and who's left out, often unwittingly. If we assume that we represent the average user, we make a huge assumption, just as we exclude people if they were not considered as part of the business requirements. We must remember that everyone is unique and that our abilities and our needs change as we age. Also, that everyone encounters barriers. As part of our shifting mindsets, we need to update our definition of disability. Under the social model of disability, it is a simple definition of disability equals impairment plus barriers. What this means is that people may experience permanent, temporary, or situational impairments. As an example, consider the people impacted by hearing loss actually extends past those who experience permanent hearing loss or deafness. People with an ear infection can experience hearing loss or deafness for a period of time, just as anybody who's been in a noisy pub may be situationally experiencing deafness or hearing loss. When we encounter those barriers in society, we can be disabled. The impact is far bigger than what we think. Based on US Census data, there are approximately about 26,000 people who have a permanent loss of one arm. There are about 13 million people in the US who have a temporary loss of one arm through an injury. And there is another 8 million people who, as new parents, are situationally impaired, attempting to undertake tasks with one arm. If we solve it for the 26,000 people with a permanent impairment, we benefit an additional 21 million people. That is huge, and it changes the return on investment in making good procurement decisions. The other thing is that everyone experiences disability if you live long enough. The incidence of permanent disability increases with age. Whilst the average incidence in society is 1 in 5, between 0 and 18, it's about 1 in 9. And we all know that if you're around the late 30s, early 40s, you've started to see some wear and tear in your body. Your eyes aren't responding as quickly, your joints might not be moving as quickly. You're seeing that wear and tear. What it means is that at the age of 55, 1 in 3 of us have some form of permanent impairment. At the age of 67, which is the retirement age at the moment, it's 1 in 2. So if you live long enough, everyone has a disability. We also have some legal responsibilities around procurement. Under the Disability Discrimination Act, people with disabilities have a right to obtain goods and use services and facilities the same as anybody else. The same from a work health and safety perspective, our workplaces should be healthy and safe. Procuring the right technologies at the start provides a health and safe environment. And finally, for students under the Disability Standards for Education, participation on the same basis straight from the start is a key standard requirement. If we procure the right technologies, we are enabling participation on the same basis. Consider the idea of a digital textbook. Procuring a digital textbook that meets accessibility standards allows those students to participate on the same basis straight from the start. What we buy should afford dignity to everyone. And dignity can be defined under 4 key criteria. It provides independent access. It provides equitable access. In other words, it doesn't take longer. It provides participation, and for a lot of technologies, provides growth. It also provides satisfaction, safety, and connectedness. That's our criteria. We want what we buy to afford dignity to all. Now, what we buy also provides a dividend because our flexibility in thinking encourages diversity in our workforce or in our school setting. That diversity enables inclusion. Inclusion then creates innovation in how we live, learn, and work. And innovation drives high performance. This is backed up by research. Inclusive procurement benefits everyone. In fact, research undertaken by PricewaterhouseCoopers for the Centre for Inclusive Design highlights that procuring products and services that are inclusively designed reaches an audience size of up to 3 to 4 times larger than intended. It also decreases the cost and demand for workplace adjustment, as well as minimising risk to our organisations. So let's look at implementing the Australian Standard, EN 301-549, which relates to accessibility requirements suitable for public procurement of ICT products and services. There are 5 key things that you need to know. 1. Identify the functional performance statements. 2. Identify the functional accessibility requirements of the technology. Then use Appendix B within the standard to align your performance statements with your accessibility requirements. Once your tender documents go out, make sure that your vendor provides detailed conformance documentation to you. And finally, when you're down to those final couple, get the vendor in to demonstrate how their products work with the inbuilt accessibility features of core OSs, such as your iPhones and your Macs and your Windows devices. Your functional performance statements are the high-level user needs applicable across technologies for all ICT procurement. As part of developing your tender documents, think about how people will need to interact with and use the technology you wish to buy. This will help you to work out which functional performance statement applies. For example, where the ICT provides visual modes of operation, then the ICT would need to provide features that enable users to make better use of their limited vision. Remember, it's all about equal access. Now let's find out what functional accessibility requirements you need. Functional accessibility requirements are the detailed accessibility requirements for the different technologies. For physical products, you'll need to look at Section 5 for the generic requirements, And then, depending on the physical nature, could be voice communication, video technologies, or hardware. For any online digital service or products, look up the relevant sections for web, non-web documents, software, documentation and support services, and emergency service access technologies. The next step is matching your functional performance statements and functional accessibility requirements. Here's where you want to use Annex B of the standard to work out what you want to plan to buy. Create yourself a table to map it out. In this example, P indicates the requirement directly supporting the functional performance statement, and S indicates the requirement provides partial or a secondary support for the functional performance statement, because some users may use the features only in specific situations. Spending the time determining your requirements is time well spent. It provides clarity not only to you, your users, and the vendors. Once your tender documents have gone out and you receive your quotes back from your vendors, what you want to make sure is that the level of evidence provided by the vendors to you as the panel increases the further that the vendors go through the selection process. At the first stage, all you need is the vendor to provide a simple statement of conformance. If the vendor has made it to the next phase of your procurement process, then a detailed conformance document, such as a VPAT document, is something that provides that additional evidence that you require. And then, at the final three, get the vendors in. Get them to demonstrate how the products actually work with the inbuilt accessibility features of the core OSs, such as your iPhone and your Mac and your PCs. If they can demonstrate how the product actually works with those inbuilt accessibility features, then you'll know that it's something you can use. It also takes the pressure off the procurement panels who may not fully understand the whole conformance document. But the vendors being able to demonstrate it to you is your physical proof that it actually is inclusive. This approach that we've talked about today is something that we're starting to implement within New South Wales Department of Education and with Department of Customer Service across by New South Wales. I hope you found this useful.